Welcome back, everyone. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn, bringing you yet another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Joseph Martins, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest. With us today is Helen Sharron. Helen is the CTO and co-founder of Selfient, an Ethereum contract tool. Before that, she held various tech executive roles, including for BNY Mellon, and she's also been the CIO and co-founder of TalentFusion, a recruitment firm that was ultimately sold to Monster. Helen, it is fantastic to have you with us today.
Thank you so very much. I'm really delighted to be here. I love your subject matter, so happy to
Excellent.
dive in.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's go right for the topic of leadership that brings us together here. You're super successful in your career. When you look at your own progression, when you look at your own journey, Helen, what do you think are the ingredients for your success?
Well, thank you for calling me successful. I really appreciate that. Um, I believe having the ability to deeply focus into things is really an important aspect of it. The hard work, I don't know any way around it,
Mhm.
but to work hard and stay focused. I also think it's really important to keep your heart light, full of energy, full of joy, and try to share that around, see the best in others, and to work collaboratively with others to gain ground together.
Keep your heart light. That's a neat way of phrasing it. How do you accomplish that? How do you get there? And how do you keep that kind of composure in difficult times of leadership?
Well, thank you for asking that question too. I believe that we all have a river that runs within us that is just so full of light and energy, and if we can find ways to tap into it, then we are rejuvenated every day and every moment. With just that
Hmm.
light and power of the universe. I'm sure I sound a little bit far out there for CTO, but that's kind of the way I see it, and it's a very helpful thing to feel that there's some energy that we can all tap into that's full of beauty, and to know others have it as well. So you can find it.
So you're absolutely right. It's slightly different language than most tech executives would use, right? So you're absolutely right. So how does that land with others? How does that come across? How do you win them over for that? Or do you select people so that they are in a similar mindset, mental space? Talk about that. How do you
Well,
create?
definitely, it's lovely to find people that are in the same mindset, but
Uh-huh.
that's not often what you find when you're in roles of
Right.
in leadership. And so it's a constant trying to reframe how leadership is perceived. And since we're talking about that today, I think we're in a state of transition. But in my career, it has always been a need, sometimes for years, for me to be able to prove myself before I get
Hmm.
the opportunity to step into the role where I'm able to share the vision that I have of what our end goals might be with the rest of the team, to be able to story tell and actually have the audience to listen to the story and to drive the vision forward. So it is an obstacle, but I
Hmm.
do believe the transition is happening somewhat. So I'm hopeful that the style of leadership that I represent becomes more impactful, more understood, maybe more respected, because it is a nurturing leadership style,
Hmm.
and the world is full of mothers, and I think that they're the answer to tomorrow's problems. Yeah.
Nice. Let me take a look at your journey from a different perspective. I'm sure
Mhm,
you've had many trusted advisors or
mhm.
friends or people who were walking beside you in your journey. What was some advice that you got from them that really resonated with you? Some advice that really stuck with you?
Stay true to yourself. That is very important. Uh, Look for the shadow sides. Look for understand why you aren't achieving success in a particular goal, and take a look at it from multiple angles to determine what you can change if possible, or to determine whether or not
Hmm.
you're on the right path. And there's lots of questions that certainly go into that. But I think probably the best advice I ever got was do the things that make you proud,
Okay.
because you can always live with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to look back at the last day, the last week, the last years and feel a sense of accomplishment. I
Hmm.
think that's where real self-worth comes from the
Hmm.
accomplishment.
And being able to look at yourself
Mm.
in the mirror and the decisions that you're making,
Hmm.
that you've done your very best to intuit other people's positions, and if you have to make a loan decision, that you're making one with
Hmm.
with the best data and intuition.
That's the best we can do. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Again, look back at your journey and some of the stages there. What was something that surprised you? And by that I mean, what were some moments where you had an idea of what it's going to be like beforehand? And then you went through something and you realized this was really different from what I expected.
What surprised me and what would be different? Well, I think one thing that surprised me, you mentioned at the beginning of the call that I've had a couple of different roles that were somewhat dissimilar and somewhat, I could
Hmm.
explain why that they all made sense. But from owning my own company and kind of being the decision maker and the one that made the calls along with my partner and how we were going to move forward, to go back into the corporate world and recognize that the hierarchy didn't necessarily see my ability to make decisions. And so it's once again having to go through a proving ground. And I suppose it always surprises me when I go into a new field and I have to start a bit at ground zero with uh, how thoughts align, how ideas align, how vision aligns, how roadmaps align, to get to the point where we have something that all can march towards. And just finding out how hard that really is every single time I've come into something new. There's no shortcuts to alignment.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about your past leadership journey. I'd like to take a look at where you are today. And this is not a question about projects, products, companies, or titles or anything like that. When
Mhm.
you look at your leadership journey now, what's an area where you think you want to focus on? What's something where you feel this is an area where I can grow, that's important, this is where I can get more impact? What is such an area?
Well, so every time we go into a role where we have the opportunity for leadership, I think it's very important to ask ourselves the question of, am I building something that's inheritable? And if that can be from a money perspective for sure, but there's other things there too, the spirit, the values, the culture, even the technology is what I'm working on, something that's going to be available and usable for generations of people to come, and will that help their journey in life? So the work that I do today, we've talked a little bit about that, but I was on
Hmm.
the mainstream, working most recently at BNY Mellon, and I've taken on a more entrepreneurial role again in Web3. And one of the reasons why I'm looking at that is I'm seeing the collapse of some structures and a new world order where the democratization of money is really very important. And we have an opportunity to build 100-year technologies that will help all of mankind to move forward in a more equilateral way. So it always kind of forms the decision about how am I going forward, and how important is it, what's the work that we're doing, and how good can we make it for humanity.
That's an amazing time horizon. So, first of all, I like the way that you used the word inheritable. I've also not heard that term used in that kind of context before. and then 100-year horizon. I'm going out on a limb here and suggest that most tech executives don't have that time horizon. How can you inspire that? How can you, or maybe because it has something to do about the limitations in which they find themselves as well, some maybe outside constraints. How do you get that perspective?
Well, I think you have to see where you are and where you want to be, and see where there's tides. So, uh, being a large, having a corporate technologies be a large part of my life, and understanding corporate governance and how important that really is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's an amazing grounding and soundboard. But to understand that some of those structures are not as healthy for mankind, and take a look,
Mm.
well, what's happening today? And the wave that I see is the whole blockchain technologies, which I think are a little bit more palatable to many than even AI is, because AI has a scary side
Mm-hmm.
to it, right? Um, so I've sort of jumped into the wave of of the blockchain, seeing that as having coming from a ground that's more ethically um, balanced, I think, than traditional models are today.
Got
So
it.
that was really important to me, and so then I start to look for others, start
Mm-hmm.
to see where my positioning is, and then start to bring in others that have the emotional intelligence and the intellectual horsepower to get why it's important, and draw them in, and build a community.
Yep. Got it. Let's take a look into the future now. And I
Mhm.
know crystal balls are never clear, they're always murky, but nonetheless, let's speculate. If we were to have this conversation again in 3 years' time, or maybe 5 years' time, something like that, what do you think will have changed about leadership then? What is different about how you would go about leadership? And again, purely about
So
leadership.
I think that money is really where leadership matters in the world today. And so then I think it's a fuel for all the fires and all the things that humanity does. That's not going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. But I think what may change
Mm.
is the control. The kind of leadership that's always been command and control, um, entirely efficiency based, strategic dominance. I think that that's going to start to collapse. We see the upheavals in the markets. We see that
Mm-hmm.
the world is insecure. People are concerned about World War III. Well, what's going to be a driver behind the change? And I think that we need to stop giving shareholders lollipops, and get them on sugar highs of money, and change that fuel into, well, what's the best fuel for us to take in? How do we use money in a way that fuels more versus tantrums? And
Mm.
so I think, again, coming into this new arena where I see the leaders all in alignment, that um, we need to have more human intuition that's also backed by
Mm-hmm.
technological foresight. And how do we bring everybody into the world, into doing something that will help save humanity, not just take resources and feed shareholders, but find a way to fish for a day, but also fish for a lifetime.
Got it. Let me ask you one last question, Helen, and then we're going to land the plane. If you look around at other tech executives, see how they're operating, see what they're doing, what advice would you give them? Where would you suggest to do something differently or to double down on something they're doing? What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, I think that we all have to start taking a look at, is our leadership style for the greater good of the people that are around us. And there's just so much available to us today. I mean, there's so much information coming at us, but sometimes the wisdom is lacking. So use your tools to challenge your own leadership style, and take a look at, well, what might we want to reconsider, if there are big political economic, monetary policies changes coming, which I believe there are.
Hmm.
How can we best get in front of that and help our neighbors, our peers, our loved ones to jump on the bandwagons that are going to be the better choice for humanity. So I think the advice is to take the moment to do the deeper dives, um, self-examination, and better understand what world it is that we're going to shape. And again, if I go back to, can we all create a world that we would want to inherit, and
Hmm.
challenge ourselves in that regard?
Yep. That's a word that's really going to stick with me. To create something that is inheritable. Is it possible? And then is it worth passing it on?
Yeah.
Helen, thank you so much. Been an absolute
Well, thank
pleasure
you.
having you here. Really
Yeah,
enjoyed
thank
the
you very much for
conversation.
the time with you, Joseph. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for the questions.
Awesome. To everyone else out there, make sure to like, subscribe, and most importantly, join us again for the next episode of the Tech Top Innovator Series. And until then, keep your brain cells active.